I got up early this morning. I was in Dallas, Texas. I went over and last night had dinner with my former classmate, Ron Kirk, and then I got up and went over to tour the Bush Library this morning and got a chance to visit with President Bush, and he was reminiscing about war stories, and I gave him a few. The one he remembered most vividly was when he was running for governor the first time. He said that he'd gone to this African-American church somewhere in the Fifth Ward. It was really out in southwest Houston, and he said he was probably the only Republican within 10 miles. I said, no, Mr. President, you had Rod Page with you, but you're probably the only white person within 10 miles of that church. So he said he was sitting there quietly, and he had to be quiet, just sitting there minding his own business, and all of a sudden he could hear a drum roar coming from the back of the room, and then he said he saw Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee walk in, and a few people stood up and started clapping. Then he said he looked and he saw this thunderous applause, and everybody was standing up, and he was thinking, damn, they doing that for Rodney Ellis? But then he looked a little closer, and I had Barbara Jordan in a wheelchair, just rolling her on down the aisle. We pulled up to him and shook his hand, and then she gave her speech, and we left. So he said he had to sit through the service, and he was wondering what to say, so he got up and said, well, I know I can't, match Barbara Jordan and the congresswoman and the state senator, but since they left, I guess I have them a little worried. They had to go to that next stop. But my best story to tell him was about the Fair Defense Act. The first version of this bill, as you will recall, was vetoed by then Governor Bush, and it was not a very thoughtful approach. The bill passed the legislature, I think, unanimously, because whatever somebody complained about, I just changed it. Maybe you've heard me tell this story, because all I was trying to do was, I thought we had a good lawsuit because of what many counties in Texas, none of yours I'm sure, but because of what many counties in Texas were doing. If we could get the right plaintiff, the right folks to litigate it, and end up in the right court, somebody was going to have to spend a lot of money, because we were not meeting the constitutional mandate of giving poor people access to our courts. And so I just changed the bill. Anytime somebody wanted something changed, no problem. Senator, representative, I'll change it. And all I wanted the county commissioners to do was simply vote to keep the system that they had in place or change it, hoping it would lead to some good litigation. But because that bill was vetoed, we came back in the next session. And I think after a presidential run, and a lot of things were coming out about Texas, I think all of us, regardless of where you were on the political scale, wanted to do something to improve our indigent defense system in Texas, and I think we have. David, you ready? Where are you? You around here somewhere? I want to thank you, Jim, for the work you've done, and your chair and everybody on your task force, because you've done a good job of working with counties in a non-confrontational way. A couple of times, without even being requested by you, I've lost my charm and lost my tact and helped a little bit from time to time, and I'm more than happy to do that again. So if you see me coming into your county and I start off with a smile, it'll all depend on if we can all get along. But if not, we'll find some way to do a better job than we are doing. I think we got about 30 counties that are represented today. Anna, I saw your tweet when I got on the airplane in Dallas, and I am glad that so many counties are represented. I have no doubt that the work that you're doing will help build a better indigent defense system in our state and be a model for the rest of the country. In the course of my years of trying to ensure Texas fulfills our constitutional mandate to provide indigent defenders with quality representation, the people in this room, the experts in this room, have played a key role in helping me to do that. Principle 5 of the ABA 10 Principles of Public Defense Delivery System states that defense counsel's workload must be, quote, controlled to permit the rendering of quality representation, and that counsel is obligated to decline appointments when caseload limitations are breached. Rarely does that happen, but that is what the ABA principles say. In recent years, it has become increasingly apparent that left to their own devices, some attorneys would not take the ABA principles to heart. The reports coming out of Harris County, my county, the seat of my Senate district, I have 2 counties I represent, were more troubling, and some were simply downright shocking. In 2011, 1 in 5 attorneys appointed to criminal cases in Harris County carried caseloads that exceeded professionally recognized maximum caseload limits. The National Advisory Commission standards on criminal justice standards and goals are the NAC standards going back as far as 1973. 23 of these attorneys had appointed caseloads at least twice the caseload limit. A few attorneys had appointment caseloads 3 or 4 times the caseload limit, including one attorney who handled over 890 cases in one single year. 383 of those cases were felonies. Considering that many of these attorneys also take on additional appointed cases in surrounding counties, like I have Harris and Fort Bend, as well as private cases, it's difficult to see how adequate time and effort can be dedicated to providing effective assistance of counsel in situations like this. The lack of proper checks and balances related to caseload standards also fails to ensure taxpayer dollars are being utilized efficiently and effectively, and can result in an indigent defense system that prioritizes certain criminal defense lawyers' profits over the constitutional rights of taxpayers who pay that money. In 2010 and 2011, the attorney who received the highest payment from the taxpayers in my county, in Harris County, earned $372,996 and $378,928 respectively, while still maintaining a private practice and other business ventures as well. Now, far be it from me to be mad at anybody for making money. I am not a hater. I point out all the time what an honor and a privilege it is to be in the Texas Senate, but it is a $600 a month honor. Obviously, I have to do other things to make a living. But when it comes to expenses of taxpayers' dollars, at least we should know whether or not the indigent client is getting the taxpayers' money worth. When I first started looking at caseload standards, the real problem became apparent very quickly. If we're going to attempt to develop any sort of guidelines, we really need to know exactly what we're dealing with, have some sense of what's going on. And the fact of the matter is, we were completely in the dark. We had no idea how many assigned cases attorneys around the state were taking. We had no idea how many were in each class, how much time they were spending on these cases with the client, and how many ended up in pleas, whether or not they use investigators and social workers and the other important factors in handling one of those cases. The business of assuring quality representation for indigent defendants is complex, no doubt about it. And throwing out restrictions without knowing the basic data, I think, would be an injustice. So these are some of the reasons that motivated me to file, along with Representative Sylvester Turner, and pass a caseload standards bill in the last session of the legislature. Starting in 2014, all attorneys, starting in January, all attorneys who accept appointments must submit an annual statement that describes the percentage of their practice time that is dedicated to appointed cases. Attorneys must submit this statement to each county in which they accept appointments, and counties will be required to repeat the number of appointments made to each attorney by case, type, and court. The Indigent Defense Commission will make this information available to the public. Transparency is always a good thing. When viewed together, this information will provide an overview of the average amount of time an attorney allocated to representing each indigent client in Texas. The legislature also directed the Indigent Defense Commission to conduct a study due when we get ready to pack our bags and move back to Austin for the next session. They'll conduct this study on defense attorney caseloads, quote, for the purpose of determining guidelines for establishing a maximum allowable caseload for a criminal defense attorney that allows the attorney to give each indigent defendant the time and effort necessary to ensure effective representation. Gathering this data will strengthen and improve the justice system in Texas and give us increased transparency and accountability for caseloads carried by lawyers who receive state and county funds to represent indigent defendants. To sum it up, this data will do 3 things. 1, provide a glimpse into how the system is working. 2, show outliers where attorneys appear to be handling excessive caseloads, and 3, allow us to leverage more resources. Without the data, it's simply highly unlikely that the state would provide more funding for indigent defense. But most importantly, the end goal is improving indigent defense and the integrity of our criminal justice system, because whenever we fail to ensure that people accused of criminal offenses receive quality legal representation, it undermines not only our Constitution, but also the core goal of our justice system. And that is protecting the public safety by ensuring that the innocent are protected and the guilty are brought to justice. I'm very proud to have been the Senate sponsor of this bill. I'm very proud of you taking the time, the 30 counties that are represented here today, to be here. And this last slide really sums up what it is all about. I always like to point out, whenever the wrong person is convicted, the person who committed the crime really feels emboldened to continue to commit those crimes. I always like to point out that when you look at this slide from that Houston Chronicle project, they went through all the exonerees in Texas at the time they did this. We've had a few more since then. It is certainly no secret and pretty obvious who most of the people are who end up in our criminal justice system. And for that reason, most of the people who end up being wrongfully convicted tend to look like me as well. Thank you very much, and I'm very honored to be with you today. Jim said if you got a couple of questions, I did stick to the script.
You did.
Because, you know, sometimes I will go on, and I always remember, sometimes I was at a roast the other night, and I called back the next day and said, I damn sure hope nobody taped this and puts this on Facebook. So I thought I'd stick to the script today. But if you have a couple of questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them before I head on out of here. I see Marilyn Poole is here, one of my classmates from law school. Good to see you here. Yes, ma'am.
I have one question. I was interested to hear you say that when someone mentioned something that they didn't like about your bill, you just changed it. So I'm just wondering why you couldn't go to Washington and maybe teach some of our
President Bush and I were discussing that same subject. You know, it's when you think about the gridlock there, and I think we have to be careful that we don't end up with it here in Texas as well. You know, around the country, around the planet at least, we encourage other democracies to have multi-party democracies. So it's as though our standard is, if you don't have multiple parties, somehow it's good to have a really robust discussion and checks and balances on the government. But here, we are doing something where we tend to demonize the other party so much, and at the end of the day, I think we ought to want to make the place work. So I hope it gets better to Washington, and I hope at the rate we're going. I don't know, you know, not the two main parties, but you know, sometimes I joke with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that if I would have let the far left in my party, in the Democratic Party, pull me over to do a lot of things that they criticize me for not doing, it'd be very difficult to be productive. And I think somehow my colleagues on the other side have to find a way that they don't let a certain element in their party pull them too far. Because at the end of the day, you know, I want Texas to work. I want the country to work. And, you know, it's okay. And, you know, I always hear a voice when I'm debating a bill in the back of my head. All of us who went to law school learned that in law school. I hear that voice saying, the other side, making up arguments. Sometimes it's really difficult. So I'm up and I'm into it, and I'm saying, I wish that fool would shut up before I get my points mixed up. But it is important that we figure out how to get along. And on this issue, I'm glad we have gotten some strong bipartisan support. Now, I must admit, I encourage the folks at the Innocence Project, the one in New York and the ones all around the country, to take every exoneration and see what lessons can be learned out of it. Now, for a time when people would walk out of jail, you'd see Barry Scheck or Blackburn, whoever the people are, some of them in this room holding their hand up, and they, you know, and there's an outpouring of emotion. And then the cameras follow them a day or two later, and they go get some of grandmother's fried chicken, and they see a loved one that they hadn't seen, and then the camera goes away, and it's over with. So with every one of these cases, whenever there is an exoneration, now I must admit, I look for the ones that give you more public support than others. So if someone, has a rap sheet and there are other issues, although they didn't commit that crime, I may not try to profile them. But, and look, I'm not a criminal lawyer. I've done my best these 30 years I've been in politics to avoid being a criminal as well. But I am not a criminal defense lawyer. I have to spell check habeas corpus every time I hit it. Which is why I'm still on the BlackBerry instead of going to the iPhone, where you're more apt to forget to hit that spell check. But on every one of these cases, you look for something. And last session, our discovery bill, I just assumed we had a discovery statute. I had no earthly idea. And when we were trying to figure out what could be Michael Martin's enduring legacy, I'm so glad he stepped up on that bill to do it, because that is not one that was destined to make it. Now once it passed, everybody's grinning and all smiling, and it's amazing. Once these bills pass, everybody's for them. But along the way, Jim, you remember that bill had a lot of twists and turns. Some of you all in the defense bar. My initial bill, I wanted the North Carolina model. I'm not a criminal lawyer, but I learned a little bit about it along the way. So I was told North Carolina's model was one of the best. Now, it would have led to a version of open file. Now, unless somebody's defense lawyer, unless some prosecutor is really pretty weak, the stuff that the defense counsel would have had to disclose, you are going to disclose it anyway. So I think that North Carolina bill is the strongest in the country. But I'd give that Michael Martinek a good second place. It's doing pretty good. One more question? Yes, sir.
Could you go back into the genesis of this when it started back in 01? When this came out, I was on the commissioner's court then, and there was talk of an individual that might be in the Harris County Jail for quite a long time that began as the beginning of this. Could you elaborate on that?
The bill that Governor Bush vetoed was in 1999. I put in a bill, I think I put a bill in 91 or 93. So I came to the Senate 24 years ago this February. And I was lucky I didn't have a fight when I came. Maybe the rest of them knew something I didn't know. So I didn't get a challenge when I left the Houston City Council and ran, and I needed an agenda. It's one good thing about a contested race. It makes you go out and, you got to go out and say you're for something. Well, I looked up and I didn't have to do that. So once I got sworn in, I pulled my staff together. I said, well, y'all got to get an agenda. We've got to have a mandate. Come a year from now, we're going to go into a regular session. I got to figure out what am I for? And I had to go from potholes and roads and the trash and, police issues on the local level, tearing down crack houses, to Austin. And I think it was Mark Strama, who's now, he's no longer a state rep here in the Austin area. He came up with the idea of putting in a bill that he thought would lead to more public defender offices in Texas, because his sister worked for the public defender's office in Los Angeles. And I think the first, if my memory serves me correct, the first public defender office in America was in California. I think it was spearheaded by either the first female to be licensed in California or one of the first females to be licensed in the country. You have to Google that in. That's the bad thing about being an insomniac. You read this stuff in the middle of the night and it all blurs. But it seems like I read that something. So Mark put the bill in. The bill never got a hearing, but I'm pretty persistent. So if I put that bill in 91 or in 93, I kept putting it in. And eventually the timing was right. You have cases out of Harris County in particular. The famous sleeping lawyer case, right? You remember that one? And then the issue of where was he awake during the most important parts of the trial? So that was sort of the genesis. You had a few counties on the verge of being sued before the legal aid people were shut down on suing governments, governmental units. There was a guy named Jerry Wesovich. Remember him? Jerry Wesovich, who I think that they run him out of here and he's in New Mexico now. Wesovich was the one who came to me. I had this bill, and I guess he didn't even have the internet. Well, he had the internet by 99. But he said, you know, you've had this bill, you've never moved it, and I'd like for you to water your bill down to move it. So it was really Wesovich's idea, and it could have been as nutty as a fruitcake. I have no idea. But he just said, I think if you could get a bill passed, even if it does nothing more than get every commissioner's court to just stop, how are you going to sue the judges? You got me? So when the system is the judges, which court you going in to sue to sue a judge? So that was really Wesovich's idea. And so we just pushed it. And you'd have to go back and check. I'm sure there were no more than 10 people that voted against that bill. And I think in the Senate, I think it passed unanimous. I may be wrong. Maybe 1 or 2 people voted against it. But that was really, and then when Governor Bush vetoed it, it was interesting. I passed a bill that session for the back-to-school shopping. You know, I whip it up every year, trying to avoid an opponent. Shop till you drop. Back-to-school, sales tax, holiday. If I had my druthers, I'd put that $20 and $40 million into education. But we were going to cut taxes. I figured I'd like to have a little bit of that. We were at Foley's in Houston, which became Macy's. And Governor Bush, after we signed that bill, which he loaded all his stuff in, he couldn't get his bills out of the House. Democrats had the House. So that, you know, I think I'm still probably about the 3rd largest tax cutter, responsible. Is that how I phrase it in there? Responsible tax cutter in the history of the state, because they had to load research and development tax cuts from North Carolina in that bill, diapers, over-the-counter drugs, internet, everything you could think of went in my little old back-to-school shopping bill. Governor Bush told me, I'm going to veto your bill on indigent defense. And I just want to give you a heads up. Don't go out and tell the press here, but you can yell and scream about it once I veto it. And you know I'm going to be running for president, and I'm going to have to release the list. And a lot of your brothers and sisters, African-American lawyers out of Harris County, wrote letters for me to veto that bill. So I want you to know when you get out there raising hell, I'm going to release that list of who asked. A lot of your supporters wanted the bill vetoed. So he vetoed it. But it was really, I think, because of that veto, we got a pretty good bill, which developed a lot of consensus. There's some things I'd like to tweak, to be honest with you. You know, it is it calls for a lot of collaboration, almost to the point of sucking up. If the commissioner's court, who have to pay the tab, want to do a public defender office or manage to assign counsel. And, you know, I'm proud we got to one in Harris County, but if I had it to do over again, or if I look up and become finance chair again, I will change it. But I may have. I've been in office 30 years. I don't know if I can last another 30 to get there. Yes, sir.
Senator, I want to commend you and urge you to continue your fight for state funding. As you know, as long as 86% of the funding of our indigent defense system is dependent upon the value of property in that county, we'll never have an equal, equitable defense system in this state. So let's keep up the fight to make sure that the constitutional right to counsel is given the same weight as the right to an education and other areas in which the state needs its responsibility.
Well, Jim, I appreciate your help and your leadership on that. I do want to say it helps. I think a lot of the money ends up being wasted. I mean, we may be about 45th, 46th now compared to other states and what we spend. Look, the way I look at it, you know, it all comes out of their pockets. As a politician, I'll say they're our pockets. You got me? And we do a lot of that in government. You know, we shuffle it around. You got me? We'll try to push it on the federal government. Federal government try to push it on us. We try to push it on the cities, the school districts, the counties. At the end of the day, it is coming out of the taxpayers' pockets. And I think it helps make the case. The more efficient we are, you know, the same way we have to make a decision on whether or not we can put our children in a public college or a private college. You know, you do a cost-benefit analysis on if you can pay for it. And I think counties, I'm going to put as many strings as I can on. But I think counties, with their power, ought to do that as well, with the resources that they are spending, because you got to leverage. And let me tell you, one of these days, the system's going to change. I mean, I think on the federal level, There's a lot more attention to these issues, and I don't think it's just this administration. You know, in terms of this criminal justice stuff, health care is a big driver of it. You got me? You know, Harris County, the biggest mental health institution in the state, is the Harris County Jail. And when you can divert some of these people, and the lawyer is a big part of that, and maybe get them some treatment or give them a second chance. You know, I don't want, that's a separate speech, but a lot of folks we put in jail are doing stuff that you all did and just didn't get caught. I did it. And a lot of them are just coming from households unlike ours. And they can't afford a decent lawyer, so they get that second chance. But look, we make tremendous progress, and we're going to keep going. Thank you all. Hope you have a great conference.